The Philadelphia 76ers are officially trailing the New York Knicks 3-1 in the series with their backs against the wall and them looking on the brink of elimination for this season. And there's a ton of blame being thrown around. The fingers are beginning to point, looking at where blame should be assigned to the most. And every player and member of the organization absolutely deserves to look themselves in the mirror and accept their portion of it. We will dive in deeper into kind of the Joel Embiid conversation, but to tip my hat here, this is not about him. That this is not a video I'm making about. In fact, it's his running mate that has never been capable of being his running mate, that being Tobias Harris. Now, to talk about the Joel Embiid stuff specifically, that Joel Embiid just logged the 11th postseason loss of his career, in which he finished with a positive plus-minus. It has happened in all three losses of the Sixers-Knicks. The Sixers are now plus 34 with Embiid in 161 minutes on the floor and minus 37 without him in 31 minutes of play. That is straight up hard to do. And when you think about how many different variations of this roster, the different options that we've seen of backup center, the Greg Monroes, the Amir Johnsons, the Boban Marjanovic, the Dwight Howards, Andre Drummonds, DeAndre Jordan, the list has gone on. And it isn't just a backup center kind of discussion here. That it's about the rest of the team not being capable of playing adequate basketball without Joel Embiid on the floor. It is embarrassing to that level. And at the forefront of this is once again Tobias Harris. That when you think about the NBA, I don't mean to be pocket watching, but money comes with expectation. That when you sign a big-time deal, you're expected to become a big-time player. And for Tobias Harris, what isn't his fault here is I do believe that number sign was always a check written that his play was unable to cash. Now, in Tobias's defense, he has seen his role shift more so than just about any player. That there have been periods of time in which Tobias Harris is looked at to be the number 2 on this team, as well as period of times in which he's essentially been reduced to a 3-and-D type role player. But the bottom line is, if he is better, if he was capable of shouldering more of the weight in any of this type of situation, it's a completely different conversation. And to look at his stats throughout, Tobias Harris, in his Sixers tenure, in the 6 seasons, 5.5 true that he has spent here, he's overall averaged 17.6 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, 3.1 assists. From beyond the three-point arc, shot 36.9% and 48.8% from the field overall. This specific season, it does look like there's a little bit of statistical growth when comparing from last year. Went from 14.7 points to 17.2 points. Saw his rebounding numbers increase from 5.7 to 6.5. His assist numbers grow from 2.5 to 3.1. His three-point percentage took a dip down to 35.3%. And frankly, one of the numbers that I wanted to highlight the most here is look at those three-point attempts. 3.7 three-point attempts is just embarrassing stuff. That is the lowest since the 2015-16 season. That is the fewest that he has ever attempted in a Sixers uniform, and that's one of the driving point, one of the main reasons that he is on this team. He is expected to be a floor spacer. They quote-unquote stretch forward that he never truly was capable of being. That the Tobias Harris dream situation is him backing and dribbling his way into some tough fadeaway two-pointers, which is about as inefficient of offense as you can possibly design, and he just does not meet the criteria of player that warrants that type of a shot. That is a Joel Embiid shot. That is a Jalen Brunson shot. That's a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander shot. That is not a Tobias Harris shot. And what I'm most frustrated about, it has been this playoff run. That we've seen some stinkers from Toby in the playoffs before, but this year is absolutely taking the cake. The dude is straight up invisible out there. And to look at his stats overall, in the 4 playoff games he's played in, he's logged 35 minutes per game. During those periods, he's scored 8.8 points, 7.8 rebounds, 1.3 assists, shooting just 39.5% from the field overall, and from beyond the three-point arc, just 25%. He attempted one 3-point attempt in yesterday's loss. That's just unacceptable. It's just everything this team does not need from him. And my biggest point about Tobias Harris, my biggest area of frustration, and to be honest, when we have this blame conversation, that this includes Nick Nurse at this point, because I'm far more frustrated the plug was just not pulled and he was not playing, which was a decision that he showed willing to do in that Miami playing game and in game 2 of this series. But what my most frustrating point with Tobias Harris from a player standpoint, there is no singular statistical area that he commands to be on the floor for. That there's not one particular skill set that he is elite at or best at to the point where it helps the Sixers team. And I know this is a little bit of my theory that you can think differently here, but I believe when rounding out a roster that you have your 2 stars, with this being obviously Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, and the other 3 players must be built around maximizing their skill sets. There's no defining skill set that Tobias Harris has that warrants him being on the field. He's a jack of all trades, master of none. That if you want a better rebounder, there's guys on this team that are better rebounders. If you want better playmaking, there's guys on these teams that are better playmakers. If you want better defending, there's guys on this team that are better defenders. He's just a completely average across the board player. And that's not a bad thing. That I'm not out here to call Tobias Harris a bad basketball player. You can make the case. I'm not going to be doing it on this one. But the point being, when so much is committed from an asset standpoint to this guy, the expectations are higher. And to lay those out specifically, Tobias Harris is the 19th highest paid player in the NBA. He accounts for 28.87% of the Sixers salary cap. He has averaged a career worst 8.3 points in 35.3 minutes per game in these playoffs. He just was never capable of filling the shoes that he was asked to. But when you have 28.87% of your cap assigned to this guy, we're talking about the 19th highest paid player in the league. Tobias Harris has made $245 million career dollars in his NBA career. He's the highest paid player in NBA history to never make an All-Star game. Those records might be more unbreakable than some of the Wilt Chamberlain numbers floating out there, and he is an all-time bag finesser. Shout out to his dad for being his agent. I'm not mad at Tobias for accepting the money that was put in front of him. This was, when you look down to it, a Sixers-caused issue. That is the Sixers' fault for ever expecting him to be this guy. And finally, they will be off the contract this year. That not just Tobias Harris, but to look at the full multi-year cap space, look at how many one-year deals are set to come off the books, that it truly will be Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey and Ricky Council IV as the guaranteed parts of this coming forward. And even Paul Reed, who's a guy that was expected to be a long-term part of this, that contract only became guaranteed if the Sixers win the first-round series, and that's not looking particularly promising right now. So Paul Reed will have to renegotiate things, and I think that honestly might end up costing him a decent bit of money, as his stock price was certainly higher last offseason than it is at this very moment. A guy that played 4 minutes in the final game, and Nick Nurse was petrified to take Joel Embiid off the floor because of how things have gone every single second he stepped off. The bottom line is that's going to be an interesting storyline to play out. But with this money that Tobias Harris is currently using, that is a source of excitement for the Sixers team. That you have paid $40 million a year for empty calories for 5 straight seasons. And even, we'll get into the Paul George conversations. Malik Monk's another name that I want to get into that I'm excited about as potential Sixers targets. For now, we're not getting ahead of ourselves, that there is still another Sixers game to be played, at least one in this series, before we dive into all this. But when you think about a Paul George conversation, I've already seen the critiques, the pushbacks of, this is another guy past his prime, washed up, all these things. The peak version of Tobias Harris still does not touch the current version of Paul George. Frankly, I don't even think it's that close. That there is areas of Paul George's game which you can look at and see as kind of an elite basketball skill. That's not the case with Tobias Harris. And also with Tobias, it feels like he's aged this year more so than ever. That he's still 31 years old. He's still primed for another big-time deal from a team. Frankly, I think it's going to be a Detroit Pistons type deal where you can go be a guy to put an empty calorie statistic and be talked about like you're a pretty good player for the remainder of his career. I do truly feel that there is no place on a contending team for Tobias Harris to play an actual role. That this is a guy that I've now switched gears to the point where I would not take him back on a veteran's minimum. That it is just best for both sides for Tobias Harris to move on. And it does feel like something clicked in his brain this year where he just was over it, where this is a two-way feeling, a mutual decision that there is no future for Tobias Harris in Philadelphia, but that still leaves it even more frustrating that he still was relied on for such a key role in a way that this team really was hurt by that being the case. So for the Tobias Harris discussion, I've tried to be easy on the guy. I've tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. To his credit, he has tried. But the fact that I'm grasping at straws and pointing out the effort level or the defensive attempts that he's putting out for a guy being paid $40 million is just straight up ridiculous. So it is pretty criminal that he's been stealing the percentage of the salary cap that he has for years now. It is a massive sign of positivity for the Sixers team that this will be off the books, that they have a chance to reinvest that money in players that can actually play a role in getting this team deeper in the playoffs. But he does encapsulate an era of Sixers basketball that will be excited to be buried. That was a poor decision in the first place. And to throw the quick context, we obviously know the Jimmy Butler story, that leading into that, the Sixers made their all-in move, trading for Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler wanted no part of sticking around in Philly, was beefing with Ben Simmons at the time. So they had to give a contract to somebody. With Jimmy not taking, you could not flip all your assets on this star hunting mission and allow both guys to walk in free agency. So it put Toby in the driver's seat to getting paid in a way in which he did not deserve. I saw somebody call him non-caffeinated Rudy Gay on Twitter, which I do think is a pretty funny comparison there. The bottom line is this Sixers team is going to be better without Tobias Harris, and we are finally at the days where this is looking likely and a possibility. That shout out to Tobias for gutting his way through it. I don't think anybody in Philadelphia expected him to play the entirety of this contract here. He goes down as an all-time almost traded guy or a trade rumors guy, but it will be better days when we're watching him in an opposing uniform. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Air out your frustrations regarding Tobias. I certainly have reached my limit, past my point where I'm willing to accept anything there. So very frustrated as well. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. Make sure you're dropping a like on this video, your comments in the comments section, and subscribing to keep this Sixers Digest family growing. As I mentioned, we do have a ton of big plans for the offseason. I'm going to be introducing a weekly live, so stay posted for that. We can have some interaction in the comments. But for now, still zeroed in on this Sixers series. We will see how things go from here, if they can find a way to win a game or two or just keep things flowing, or if they ultimately roll over in Game 5 and give the Knicks the gentleman's sweep, which I would hate to see. Regardless, I'll be here keeping you guys posted every step of the way. Appreciate you guys once again. Talk next time. Peace.